Okay, today I'm going to show you how I paint a silicone baby. This one is it's just a head. It's not necessarily even a kit head. It's just a head from a sculpt that I made, just for the benefit of showing you. So basically, I've washed it really well. When you get a kit or a full body silicone blank to paint yourself, it will be prepared, ready for painting. It should have all the waxy release agent removed from it, ready to paint. But I always give it a wash as well. Just literally wash hot soapy water with plenty of dishwashing soap, like well, Fairy Liquid we get, whatever you use, just a strong soap that hasn't got too many additives in it. So this is my baby Lucy head. I've just poured it. It's not brilliant pour, but just for the benefit of showing you how I would paint it. So I've washed it and dried it, and the first thing I do, because I pour with reasonably soft silicone, this one's just Ecoflex 20, but I think the harder the silicone, the better the surface, but you always get little undulations and things. This actually has a seam in the back. You won't get a seam in the back with a baby you've bought. It's just that I've cast it really quickly with an old mould. So I'm going to ignore that because I'm going to be rooting her anyway at some point if I go on that far. So as I'm painting today, I thought I'll just paint a head on video to show you how I do it. It's not necessarily the right way. It's just how I do it. I think everybody does it differently, like any reborn artist using a vinyl kit. It's the same with silicone, but obviously it's different products, different techniques to vinyl. Okay, so what I do is I tend to stick a piece of a wooden doweling thing in the head, which means I've got some kind of something to hold it with. It gives it a bit more structure rather than it being all floppy. But it also means I can stand it in my little homemade stand here, which is got little holes in it for putting skewers in for when I'm sculpting, and it's got I've drilled a couple of larger holes in that I can stick this in. So I actually put the whole thing. I force cure my painting. Not everybody does, and lots of people say you shouldn't do it, but I do. So I'll show you how I do it. You can choose whether or not you want to do it the same. So this is Lucy. So the first thing I'm going to do really is cut out her eye sockets to fit her eyes. And now I'll be painting her sometimes with the eyes in, sometimes with the eyes out. I think I'm going to cut the sockets out and I'll put the eyes in to show you, and then I'll paint most of it probably with the eyes out. Okay, I'm just going to lower the video a little bit. Okay, that's a bit easier. You can see what I'm doing now. I can't have the video literally over my shoulder, so there'll be some things you won't be able to see me doing. So what I'm going to do is cut the eye socket out. So I'm going to hold the knife approximately at the angle that the eyes will be. These are the eyes I'm fitting. So they're kind of oval and they're at an angle. So I'm going to cut around the socket at approximately the angle that I think the eyes are. This is a scalpel blade. It's very sharp, and I have had several quite nasty gashes. I shouldn't be allowed to use a knife. I quite often nearly cut my finger off using this, so be really careful. So I cut around the eye basically. As I say, in the approximate angle that the glass eye is going to go. I always use glass eyes. I prefer them. I know a lot of people use acrylic eyes, and I always use for the silicone dolls. I use the oval eyes. I find them easier to fit because they're the similar shape to the actual eye. So I'm just cutting around the eye. I'm doing this quite quickly, I hope I'm not messing it up. I'm really sorry if you can't hear what I'm saying. I have had quite a few people saying, I can't hear what you're saying, can you speak up? Well, I find it really difficult to talk and work at the same time, so I do tend to mutter. So I apologise if you can't hear what I'm saying, but you can at least see what I'm doing. I can't do much about that, apart from getting professional equipment, which I certainly can't do. Okay, so once I've cut around the eye socket, I cut across in the eye. I do it from out in, so I do it like that, so to have 4 segments. And the same with the other one. Right, so what I have is an eye with a crisscross on it, really. Okay, so now what is really useful is these things, which I did do a video once before on cutting the eye out, and I had loads of people saying, oh, they're called hemostats or they're called forceps. Yeah, they're called hemostats or forceps depending which country you live in. I think America calls them hemostats. I think here in the UK we call them just forceps. You can get them on eBay really, really easily. They're so handy because you can grab the sponge, you can grab the silicone, and it locks, so you don't have to worry about holding them in a certain way to keep the tension on them or anything. So I'm just cutting them out. You can cut deeper afterwards, and you can also backfill with silicone, so don't worry too much about how much you're cutting out. You'll kind of get to know as time goes on, but the first time, if you cut too much out, you can just flood it with silicone and do it again, and if you cut too little out, well, you can go back in and cut a bit more. So I'm using, to cut them out, I'm using these little, again, they're called ophthalmic scissors, and again you can get them on eBay. Really, really handy. Because again, you don't have to faff around putting your fingers in the holes, you just snip away at them, so you can keep all your concentration on what you're doing on the baby, and not worry too much about holding the tools. So you cut each of the 4 segments out. So to kind of try and cut out about the same depth as the eye. So look at the eye and think, well, I'll cut about that much out, because obviously that's how deep you want your socket to be. Right, and then you can just test your eye in it. Sometimes it works first time, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, that's not too bad. You don't have to worry too much about the positioning of your eye at this stage. You can always go back in and do that later. But the eye in the socket, if you look at pictures of babies' eyes or people's eyes, the iris part, the coloured part, is actually higher in the socket than lower. So there's usually no, with baby there's usually no white showing, well, very little white showing, because the eyeball's so big at that stage, because we're all born with, our eyeballs are almost the same size as they are when we're adults. But usually it's the half circle is at the bottom, so they're higher than they are lower. A lot of people make the mistake of going like that, and the baby just looks like really shocked, really surprised. And that's fine, you know, you might want your baby to look surprised, but that is a more natural position for the eyeball. Okay, so I'm going to do the other one. If you buy a blank kit from somebody, if you buy it from the doll artist, There's a good chance if you ask them they might fit the eyes for you if you're nervous, but there really is nothing to worry about. It's just another technique that you just need to get the hang of, really. It's all part of the joy of silicone. So I'm basically just snipping so that it's cutting approximately to the right depth. You just have to at this stage forget the fact that it looks like a baby, because the thought of doing something like this to a real baby just makes you feel quite ill. So, you know, at the end of the day, at this stage, it's just a lump of silicone. Okay. Alright, so they fit. They'll need some fitting at the end, but they fit fine. So that's going to be fine for us for painting, because I want to be able to paint the edge of the eye, and you can't do that and then cut it out afterwards. So I'm just clipping the edge here so that I can push the eye higher up if I need to later. Okay, so that's kind of it. So there she is with her eyes in. Okay, the next job I'm going to do is actually opening her mouth. She's got a little bit of an open mouth, this one, but I'm going to just snip to kind of almost the edge of the lips here. And I'm going to go in with a scalpel and cut. I want this one to be able to take a dummy, so I'm going to go in and just cut the opening wider so that there's a bit of a kind of hole in there, again, you have to kind of push the silicone all over the place. Forget it's looking like a baby. Again, these hemostats, or whatever you call them, are very handy for grabbing the actual lump of silicone, holding it so that you can cut around it. I don't think you can actually see what I'm doing here, so apologise for that. Short of cutting a finger or two off, I don't think there's much I can do. I can't get the camera any closer really, but you can see what I'm doing. So basically I've cut a big glob of silicone, and now I just need to cut it out. Doesn't have to be that pretty. I'm not going to be sculpting the inside of the mouth. It isn't sculpted, and I'm not going to faff around putting a tongue in or anything, not with this one. So she has a mouth that will open now and will fit a dummy. If I can find a dummy to show you. I can't, but at some point later I will do. So basically her mouth is open, ready, so her lips can be painted. I'll be trimming off the little bits a little bit. Okay, so that is little Lucy ready for painting. Now the first thing I do, you don't have to do this, but I do it, is I cover the whole of the head, whole of the, well, whatever I'm painting, head, body, whatever, with just a thin down coat of the silicone, the painting silicone, just to kind of seal it and give it a really smooth surface to use. Maybe that's because I pour my own babies and they're not perfect, I don't know, but that's what I do anyway. You don't have to do that. If you buy a kit that's been manufactured, you know, by a really professional person, you probably don't have to do that, but I don't know. People, I can only show you what I do. So that's Lucy, so I'm going to pop her on the thingy while I mix up some silicone for doing that. Now, what I use is a Psycho Paint A and B. Basically, you mix together the Psycho Paint A and B, add thinner, and then you can add the pigment to whatever colour you want it. Now, I like to decant the silicone into little squeezy bottles so I can control how much I'm using. So I'm going to do that, and I'll come back in a minute. Okay, I'm back. I've now squeezed Psycho Paint into my little bottles. So this is A and B. One is A and one is B. So I'm going to squeeze out an equal quantity of each. And mix around well. So this is neat Psycho Paint A and B, and then I'm going to add some thinner so that I can paint it on. Now this is Bob Ross thinner. It's an odourless thinner, which I like. Sorry if you hear weird noises, it's my dogs. As always, they like to be with me, and when they hear me making videos, they hear me talking, I think they think I'm talking to them, so they either try and answer me or they fall asleep and start snoring. At the moment they're snoring. So you have two Labradors snoring in unison. So I'm mixing this to kind of cream consistency, and I'm going to apply it over the whole head. As I say, I quite like having a smooth a really smooth surface to start painting on. So I'm going to get the little chappy, and just paint it on over the whole head. Silicone doesn't half attract fluff and dust and bits of hair and things. Very sticky to work with. It's funny how people complain they can't hear what I'm saying, but they can hear the dogs snoring. Always hear the dogs snoring. Okay, now silicone will cure at room temperature. Psycho Paint, if you don't dilute it, if you just mixed it and let it cure, it would cure quite quickly. But we obviously do dilute it. Now, when it's diluted down really thinly, it does take quite a long time to cure, probably a few hours. And I coat my babies using several coats. So literally you would be painting a coat on and waiting 6 hours for it to dry. I prefer to force cure it in the oven. As I say, it's something that some people don't recommend, but I do it. So what I'm going to do is, now I've coated the baby, I'm going to pop her in the oven. It's very, very low. Basically, the warmer the room temperature, the quicker it cures. So what I'm trying to mimic in the oven is a warm room, a very warm room, not an oven, not a hot oven. We're not baking it. It's just helping it to cure by making the temperature like a very, very warm room. So I bake it on, I put the oven on the lowest temperature I can put it on, which is about 120, 125. And literally in about 5 minutes that will be completely cured and ready to do the next coat. But always make sure that it's cooled before you start painting on it again. So I'm going to go and pop that in the oven now, and I'll be back in a sec. Okay, he's all cured, sorry, she is all cured, it could be a he I suppose, and ready to start painting the next coat. So basically what I'm going to do is, again, mix some A and B, although actually I've got some A and B still mixed from previously, because I force cured the actual paint's cured on the baby, but obviously I still have some left in the tub. Now you only need small amounts of pigment. I'm using, I use a lot of SilcPig pigments. This is a SilcPig pigment called Blood. It's a really useful colour actually for blushing. It's a really natural colour to use on the babies. Obviously you want lots of different colours, but the first, I do a very very thin layer of this to start with. Just, it gives it some definition and a teeny bit of colour, so I can see where I want to paint the next layer. That's just what I do. So again, I'm not going to be actually painting anything very in much detail or anything. I'm just going to be more or less slapping on the colour, and it will find its way into some of the little creases and nooks and crannies and just give it a little bit more definition so I can see what I've got. And it also gives it a slightly more natural colour as a base. So I'm just going to brush it on all over. As I say, the back isn't finished off because I just poured it really quickly. Normally if you get a kit, you won't get a seam on the back of the head. So it just gives us a bit of a colour. It doesn't have to be really even. And in the ears, really handy thing to have while you're doing this is a pair of tweezers, because as you go along you'll find little bits of hair sticking to the silicone. So as I say, I'm not doing it in any great detail. I'm doing it more or less just all over, so that it does kind of give it a bit more definition. It starts to collect almost invisibly in the creases and gives it just a teeny bit more colour, so you can see how the baby's face might look and start planning how you're going to paint it. Okay, if you think it's too thick you can round it off a little bit with a sponge. Make sure the sponges are latex free. Don't use anything with latex in it because it will affect the cure of the silicone. Okay, so it's barely there really. It just gives it a teeny bit of a foundation. Okay, I'm gonna cure that as well. Okay, that's cured now. So what I'm going to do next is not blues, but a dark sort of shadowy undertones type colour. So I'm going to mix up some paint again. And so I'm going to use a kind of purpley colour really. Just as a sort of like, just to do the deeper shadows, give it some depth. So I'm going to mix I think some of the blood that I used before, most of my colours, everybody has their own favourite colours, don't they? I'll tell you what colours I'm using as I use them, but you will find your own colours that you like to use. I use some SilcPig, and just a few I use are the made by Sam, the people who make the matting powder, Silicone Art Materials, and there are just a few really nice colours that I use a lot of those. So this is the blood of the SilcPig, and I'm just going to drop a drop or two of the cyan from the Sam colours, just to give it a purpley tinge. There we are, just one drop does it. So that gives a kind of really dark colour. It's almost black really, but it's got more depth to it than a black. So I'm just going to do a very, very light touch of this in the parts where we need it to be quite a lot of depth, like the corners of the eyes and the shadows, but it's going to be quite a thin coat. So basically we can put it in and take it off again, so it just gives it a kind of, I don't know if you can see that, it needs to be almost invisible. Corner of the eyes, and you can pounce it off again with a sponge again. Creases across the top of the nose, and this little baby has a few little frown lines, so I'm just going to put it into the creases of the frown lines and pounce it off. Nostrils, inside the nose. And the creasy bits. Don't let it build up anywhere, because you really don't want this colour to be dark. I'm just going to, it's just a shadow, the bits that you want to build up the colour. I've managed to get blue on my fingers, so I need to make sure that doesn't transfer to the head. Okay, so basically, I don't know if you can see that, it's just giving it some depth. Okay, I've got blue on my fingers, so I need to just wipe that off. And also wipe it off the head. Oh, it's at the back. I say it's just a practice piece really, this, so it doesn't matter too much. Okay, so I'm going to go and cure this. Okay, I'm going to go and cure this and see how it looks. Okay, that's cured now, so I'm going to do next the blues, veins and undertones. So I'm just going to mix up some silicone. I find a good colour to use. The blue that comes with the SilcPig pigments is a good one. I also use cyan from the Sam pigment collection, and there's also a blue one, so it doesn't really matter which one you use. Obviously it depends on your personal preference. I'm just going to use cyan on this for the moment. There we go. Right, I'm going to do the veins first. I'm just going to clean my hands off because blue does stain if you get the pigment on anything. There we are. Okay, first of all I'm going to do the vein. I'm going to do a couple of little veins in the head, so I'm just going to use a small round brush, reasonably fine. I'm just going to do some veins down here. So silicone's a weird thing. If you get some silicone on the brush and hold it near the piece, it jumps off the brush and goes onto the piece of silicone. It's really weird like that. So I'm just going to do a fine vein coming down. Like so. Some people don't like veins. I quite like veins on babies' heads, so I do tend to put them in. Obviously you don't have to. Just gives it that little bit of realism, I think. And up onto the top of the head. Let me put another one this side. There we are. So barely there really, and as I work on it they'll go underneath some more layers. So okay, I'm just going to I'm going to cure those before I go on to doing the other blue bits. Okay, the veins have cured now, so I'm just going to do the bluish undertones. So I'm going to use the same blue, the temples, basically applying it and pouncing it off so that it gives a kind of just a shadow. Again, the inside of the eyes, across the nose. Making sure it doesn't collect. In the creases. And the areas where we're going to be working up a darker flesh colour just gives it that background shadow. Behind the ears. Inside the ears. Nostrils. And I like to do a base coat of blue on the lips too. Barely there. And across the brow. Okay. Starting to take shape, starting to get some depth now. Okay. I'll cure that. Okay, that's cured, so I've got all my under layers done now. My blues and undertones, all the shadows, the veins. What I need now is to start working up the skin layers. So what I'm going to do, I've still got some blood colour from previously that hasn't started to gel yet. So I'm going to just pour that into a larger part, or some of it, water it down a bit, and then use this for my first mottling layer. Need a little bit more pigment. this is really quite watery and a bit like sort of consistency of semi-skimmed milk. So this is similar to what we're all used to doing with reborning. I'm going to make a mottling sponge by pulling out random bits from the head of the sponge. Again, it's a non-latex sponge, there's no rubber in this at all. If you use a normal latex sponge, the silicone will not cure, it'll have an effect on it. Okay, so it's very similar to how we would do it on a reborn baby. Anybody who's done reborning, load the sponge and almost just print it onto the surface like a rubber stamp, really, just giving that pattern, leaving that pattern effect. More or less all over. Leave the detail bits and over the back as well. And then I use a clean sponge just to mop up any bits that have any bits of pigment where there's too much pigment on. Okay, and then again cure in the oven. Well, cure either naturally or in a lukewarm oven for a few minutes. I'm going to just add a little bit of this colour to the ears and lips, so every time I do a layer I can add a teeny bit. There we are. Inside the eyes. Okay, I'm going to cure that now. Okay, that one's cured, so I'm going to mix up another colour for mottling. I think I'll do a green. Like with reborning, it doesn't really matter what order colours you do, and everybody has their own preferred colours, but I do like to put a green in. I'm just going to mix it up. I like to use these lolly sticks for mixing. It doesn't, I mean, I will use a brush at the end, but you don't get it all sort of kind of, the brush is all manky with gunge to the same extent. Right, so I'm going to use a green. Let's see what this is like. I've not used this colour for quite a while. I like to mix it up a bit so that it's different each time. So no two babies are using the exact same colour. That's quite a good one. Nice bright green, but very pale. Maybe a bit more colour than that. So the green on the colour wheel counteracts the pinks. So if your baby's quite pink, just use a lime green colour. I mean, this isn't because of that. This is just a basic colour I want to use. So I'm just going to print it on the baby's head like I did with the blush colour. It's barely visible. It's not really visible at all, in fact. It's just there, adding to the depth. Okay. And I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to add a teeny bit of yellow to this. To give me a really nice lime green. And I'm going to just add a little bit of this colour mottled over the top of the green. Very patchy. Around the fleshy bits, really. The opposite bits to the parts that are going to be blue, like sort of the nose, the ears, and then pounce it off with a clean sponge if it's collected too much. We don't want a green baby, but we want just some depth. Last thing we want is a green baby. There we are. And I'm going to cure that. Okay, I don't know if you can see on the video the skin depth starting to build up. It's not a brilliant light here. Move the light a bit. It's starting to really start to look good. Okay, I'm going to cure this and then move on. Okay, the last colour I'm going to use for mottling is blue. A very a very light one. Okay. Right, I'm going to bake that. So that's all the mottling. Okay, that's all cured now. So I'm going to start building up the colour of the lips and the darker areas first of all. So I'm going to put a bit of a cocktail stick in the mouth to hold the lips apart so they don't stick together, like so. That way I can paint the lips and they're not going to stick together as they cure. So I'm going to mix up a slightly thicker mix of the silicone with the blood colour, the SilcPig blood. It's a really good basic blush colour. And I'm going to dilute it, but not a great deal, because I want this to be quite a good coat. Oops, cardboard. Okay, obviously I can't use it like this because it's just like honey. You can't paint with honey. So I'm going to add a little bit of thinner just to loosen it up, but not a massive amount. That's too much. Just to loosen it. Add some more pigment. If I can find it, there it is. So it's quite a strong pigment and quite a thick mix. So this is going to be the base coat for the darker bits. So we're talking about the ears. You can build it up over several layers. Inside the eyes. And the crease inside the eye here. Also the rim of the eye, where it actually goes into the eyeball. Which is like a pale flesh colour. Okay. So I'm going to just outline, just do an outline of the lips and first fill in of them. in the nostrils. And the creases. And pounce off the excess so you can't see any actual brush strokes anywhere. I'm not going to do any lashes on this baby. When you actually look at photographs of babies, very few babies you can actually see any brows. You can't actually see brows on babies mostly unless they're very, very dark, and even dark babies sometimes you can't see any eyebrows when they're first born. I think badly done brows on a newborn baby look worse than no brows at all. So on this baby I'm not going to be doing any eyebrows. I'll do lashes but no eyebrows. There we are. So just working up the colours, the blush bits. And the creases and the shadows. And what I also tend to do at this stage is flood the mouth while I've got a blood colour mixed up. When I've finished using it, I add quite a bit of thinner so that it'll run. And then let it flood the mouth. Swirl it round. And then I'm going to cure that. Okay, I'll cure it like that so that the deepest red bits in the mouth go to the back and give it some depth. Okay, I'm going to mix up another red for the lips now. If I can find something to mix it in. Yeah. And this time add a little bit more red just to make it a bit brighter. Okay, so I'm going to use the blood as the base. But add a brighter, more of an appley red, just to give it a teeny bit more redness, a bit more blush. So that's the blood red. I'm going to add just a teeny bit of a brighter red colour, which is I'm not sure what this colour is. It's just one of my favourite ones. It gives it more of a pillar box red tint to it rather than the dull blood red. Okay, I'm going to put a thin coat over the lips and some of the other areas too. So. All babies' colourings are slightly different. No two are the same, and you will get colours that you like. Some people use the same colours every time. Some people differ them. If you use them the same ones every time, you'll get consistent results, but all your babies will look very similar. Which may be what you want. You know, once you get it right, it's a good idea to carry on. I like to use different ones each time. So that's the second coat on the lips. A little bit in the ear. We don't want it to look like the poor baby's got bleeding ears, but just give it a bit of a lively look. And I'm going to use it also as a very first light blush. So I'm going to use a torn sponge and just start giving it a teeny bit of colour, pounce it on. And pounce it off. We don't want it to look like she's got measles or mumps or whatever. So it's just a bit of colour. There we are. Keep working it until until you're happy with the level of colour. I think that's quite good. Quite happy with that. maybe a little over the brow. And the odd bit pounced over the head, just to give it some colour. You can see the head through the rooting usually, so give it some colour. And I'm going to cure her now. Looking good. Right, okay. Here she is. Let's take her thing out of her mouth so she doesn't look silly. There we are. And let's put her eyes in. Little girl, you can see now. You can see what's going on now. There she is. No, I don't actually think she needs any more colours on. Sometimes I'll add a magenta and maybe another lime green and perhaps some more blushing, but I'm not going to do that right now. I think she's fine. So what I'm going to do is a seal coat, and then I'll mat her. She's only a practice head anyway, so okay. So what I'm going to do is mix up some clear Psycho paint to use as a seal coat. So I excuse me, I do dilute this, but I apply it reasonably thick, like sort of cream consistency, creamy milk consistency, and that will seal in all the colours, all the painting I've done. I mean, they won't come off anyway, I mean, but it'll just give it a really good strong seal before the matting. It'll give a nice smooth surface for me to mat as well. Okay, so that's the silicone. Okay, I'm just going to literally paint it on. Make sure there are no drips. There we are. Do the back. Right, and I'm going to cure that. Okay, Lucy's painted, she's sealed, and all that is left now is the matting coat. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'll pop her in her little board. I use sand matting powder. It's there's different matting powders. There's Fuse FX. I like this. It's my favourite one. But you know, it's one of those things. It's everybody to their own. So I'm going to mix up some Psycho paint, just transparent, just like I did with the seal coat, and maybe a little bit thinner. And add thinner. There needs to be enough silicone in here that it's going to be quite sticky and let the surface, let the matting powder stick to the surface of the silicone, but not so much that it'll actually go thick and cloggy. So that's approximately how thick I would do it, maybe a little bit thinner, teeny bit more thinner in. So it's kind of the thickness of whole milk, I'd say. Okay, and then I just paint over the whole thing like I did when I was sealing it. Make sure I cover every little bit. I'm going to take the eyes out actually to do this. I'm going to avoid the lip area because I don't want them to stick together, and I don't have a problem with the lips being shiny. So I'm just going to paint around the lips because the bits that I paint now obviously are going to be matte. I can go back in and re-shine some of the areas, but I prefer not to have the lips sticking together at this stage. It's all over. With this fairly thin coat of silicone. I like to work fairly quickly because I like it all to be at the same tackiness at the same time. Just going to lower the camera a bit. You can obviously, with a full body, you'd work in stages, not do the whole thing together. And you can do one side, then turn it over and do the other side. Right, that's everything kind of coated, but now I need to make sure that there's nothing excess. So I get some tissue and I start wiping it back off with the same brush, working quickly, but making sure there's nothing, there's no thick areas, nothing's collected in the seams, in the holes, in the little pockets, in the creases, that it's all just a thin sticky layer, almost damp rather than wet. If you do it too thickly, if it's too thick, it will just go really cloggy with the matting powder. Okay, you can pounce off with the sponge, but I don't want to take too much off. Okay, that seems about right, and it's quite sticky, so I think it's about ready to take the matting powder. So again, work quite quickly. What I'm going to do is working with a very soft mop brush, completely coat it. Try not to breathe it in, it's not nice. It doesn't smell of anything, and it's completely safe, but you don't want it to breathe it into your lungs, really. Make sure it's well coated. No wet bits. Just tend to get everywhere. Okay, and once you've coated everything, you can either leave it to cure or you can fast cure it in the oven. I tend to put it in the oven again. Probably a bit longer, this one, maybe 15 minutes, as opposed to the usual sort of 5 minutes for the different coats. So I'm going to pop her back in her little stand and I'm going to go and cure her. Okay, and there we have her. She's been matted, she's been washed, and she's all finished, more or less. Obviously I would root her normally, and I'd give the shiny bits a bit more. I'll just give them a little bit of shine, like her lips. Bring it back around the eyes and nostrils, and the ears. There we are. And so that's a very, very quick demo of how I paint my silicone babies. I don't do everyone the same, do them all differently usually, but yeah, that's little Lucy. Okay, little sweetie. She just needs a body now.